The Lucknow Pact 1916 Political Science. The Lucknow Pact 1916, the zenith of nationalist unity and the foundation of communal constitutional politics. The Lucknow Pact of 1916 stands as one of the most significant and paradoxical agreements in the history of the Indian national movement. From a political science perspective, it represents a strategic high-level political negotiation between the Indian National Congress and the All India Muslim League, creating a fleeting movement of Hindu-Muslim unity to present a common constitutional demand to the British. However, this unity was achieved at a profound cost. The formal and explicit acceptance of the principle of separate electorate by the Congress, a decision that would fundamentally and permanently alter the trajectory of India's constitutional development and communal politics. The political context. The confluence of strategic interests. The pact was not born out of sudden goodwill, but was the product of a convergence of strategic calculations by all major political actors in the aftermath of World War I. The Indian National Congress, reunification, and the need for a broad front. The reunion of moderates and extremists. The outbreak of World War I in 1914 created a new political environment. The British need for Indian support and the interment of many extremist leaders softened the stance of the moderates. This allowed the reunification of the Congress at its 1916 Lucknow session, ending the 9-year schism since Surat split of 1907. Strategic imperative. A reunited Congress under the leadership of figures like Bal Gangadhar Tilak and Annie Besant sought to present a powerful united national front to the British to demand self-government after the war. An alliance with the Muslim League, the other major all-India political organization, was seen as a masterstroke to amplify their bargaining power. The All-India Muslim League, the search for legitimacy and security. Internal divisions. The League was itself divided between a pro-British old party and a younger, more nationalist young party influenced by the Congress. Strategic shift. Under the leadership of Muhammad Ali Jinnah, who was then a member of both parties and a staunch advocate of Hindu-Muslim unity, the young party gained ascendancy. The League realized that simply being a loyalist counterweight to the Congress had yielded limited gains. Aligning with the Congress on a common platform offered a path to greater political relevance and more substantial constitutional safeguards for Muslims. The goal of constitutional security. The League's primary objective was to secure and entrench the system of separate electorates granted by the Morley-Minto's reform of 1909, but with better terms. The international context, the impact of World War I. The war led to increased taxation, inflation, and hardship in India, fueling anti-British sentiment. The British rhetoric of fighting for the freedom of small nations like Belgium against German aggression was skillfully turned against them by Indian nationalists, who asked why the same principle did not apply to India. Source integration. The dynamics of Congress reunification are detailed in Richard Gordon's articles. The Hindu Mahasabha and the Indian National Congress 1915 to 1926 and B.R. Nandas Gokhale, the Indian moderates and the British Raj. The shift within the Muslim League is analyzed in Aisha Jalal's The Sole Spokesman, Jinnah the Muslim League, and Demand for Pakistan, which highlights the Jinnah's early unitary vision. The key provisions of the pact, a detailed constitutional blueprint. The Lucknow Pact was a detailed agreement on a future scheme of constitutional reforms for India to be presented jointly to the British government. Structure of government. The pact demanded that India be granted self-government after the war. It proposed a decentralized federal structure with a clear division of powers between the center and the provinces. Expansion of legislative councils. It demanded a substantial increase in the size of the central and provincial legislative councils. 3. Separate electorates and weightage. The core of the bargain, this was the most critical and contentious part of the agreement. The Congress accepted the Muslim League's demand for separate electorates, but with the system of weightage that defined representation for different communities. Separate electorates for Muslims, the pact formally endorsed the system whereby Muslims would vote for Muslim candidates in constituencies reserved from them. Quantum for representation. The pact fixed the proportion of Muslim seats in the provincial and central legislatures. Crucially, this was higher than the Muslim proportion of the population in provinces where they were a minority, a concession known as weightage. For example, in the central legislature, Muslims were to be given one-third of the seats. In Muslim minority provinces like Bombay and Madras, they were granted a higher percentage of seats than their population would warrant. These were designed to allay Muslim fears of majoritarian domination. In Muslim majority provinces like Punjab and Bengal, they were given a lesser share of seats in their population would warrant as a concession of the Congress. Powers of the legislatures. The pact demanded that 4/5 of the members of the imperial and provincial assembly be elected. It demanded that the legislature should have full control over the budget and the executive should be responsible to the legislature. Source integration. The full text of the pact and its constitutional details are reproduced in historical document collections like M.P. Singh and H. Roy's Indian Political Thought. Themes and thinkers and analyze Granville Austin's The Indian Constitution, Cornerstones of the Nation. A political science analysis, Trump and tragedy. The Lucknow Pact was immediately hailed as a monumental achievement, but its long-term consequences were deeply ambiguous. The immediate Trump, the peak of nationalist unity. Unprecedented Hindu-Muslim unity for the first time, the two major political organizations had come together on a common platform in the 1916 Lucknow session for the Congress, where the League also met, was a celebration of its unity. It demonstrated that Indians could overcome their differences to present a united demand for self-rule. Strengthened bargaining position. The joint demands presented the British with a formidable opposition. It forced the British to take Indian political aspirations more seriously, directly influencing the subsequent Montagu Declaration of 1970, which promised responsible government. Jinnah as the ambassador of unity, the pact was the pinnacle of Jinnah's early political career, earning him the title it reflected his vision of a united India where Hindus and Muslims could coexist as equal partners through constitutional agreements. A long-term tragedy, the institutionalization of communalism. The Congress Faustian bargain. In its quest for a united front, the Congress committed a cardinal error from a secular and nationalist perspective. It legitimized and constitutionalized the principle of communal representation by accepting the political identity was fundamentally religious. The Congress undermined its own claim to be a secular body representing all Indians irrespective of creed, creating a constitutional precedent. The pact made separate electorates the benchmark for all future constitutional discussions. The Government of India Pact Act 1919 Montagu Chelmsford Reform formally incorporated the terms of the Lucknow Pact, thereby legally entrenching the communal award that the pact had designed. The slippery slope to partition. While aiming for unity, the pact inadvertently strengthened the very logic that would lead to separation by treating Muslims as a separate political nation with predefined rights. It provided the ideological and constitutional groundwork for the two-nation theory that would be fully articulated by the League in 1940. Aisha Jalal argues that it set a precedent where the League's role became that of bargaining for communal rights within a constitutional framework, the role that eventually escalated into a demand for separate state. Source integration. The tragic paradox of the pact is a central theme in the work of nationalist historians like Bipin Chandra in India's Struggle for Independence, who views it as major tactical blunder. Parth Chatterjee in The Nation and Its Fragments might analyze this as a moment where the communal question was allowed to fragment the narrative of the national. Conclusion. It is the last thing. You can write it in a short answer for the Lucknow Pact 1916. The Lucknow Pact of 1916 was a pivotal crossroads in the modern Indian history. In the short term, it was a brilliant strategic success, a masterclass in political negotiation that demonstrated the potential for anti colonial solidarity. It forced the British to acknowledge the majority of Indian political demands. However, this success came with a devastating mortgage on the future. By accepting the colonial logic of religiously defined political constituencies, the Congress and the League, in a joint act, poisoned the well of Indian politics. The impact transformed separate electorates from a colonial imposition into a nationally negotiated settlement. It provided the template for the communal politics that would dominate the 1920s. Negotiated settlement, 1920s, 30s, and 40s, ultimately making the partition of India an increasingly plausible and then inevitable political solution. Lucknow Pact therefore stands not just as a movement of unity but as a foundational document of the communal constitutional politics that would lead to the creation of Pakistan. That's it. The topic is completed.